All right, let's get into it. Today, we're tackling a literary giant, one of the most intense psychological thrillers ever put to paper, Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. So let's just jump right in with a question, a pretty uncomfortable one. Are some things wrong unless you're the one doing them? Think about that for a second. It's a seriously disturbing idea, and it's the exact thought that sends our main character into a complete spiral. And that question, it leads to this absolutely chilling theory from our main character. He literally wrote an article about it. He claims humanity is split in two. You've got your ordinary people who have to follow the rules, and then you've got the extraordinary ones who can pretty much do whatever they want. I mean, talk about a dangerous idea. So how does somebody get to a place where they think they have a right to kill? Well, to figure that out, we have to look at the guy who wrote the book and the character living inside it, which brings us to our first part, A Crime of Ideas, the man and the motive. To really get this story, you have to get the author, Fyodor Dostoevsky. This wasn't just some abstract thought experiment for him, no. He was wrestling with some serious, real-life demons. For him, that line between life and death, right and wrong, it was incredibly thin. And when I say real-life demons, I mean it. Just look at this. In 1849, Dostoevsky was literally let out to be shot by a firing squad. He was standing there, seconds away from the end, when a messenger from the Tsar shows up with a pardon. Can you even imagine? That experience, staring death right in the face, it completely changed him. It's where all his ideas about suffering, redemption, and what a human life is worth really came from. So all of that intense personal experience, Dostoevsky pours it right into his main character. Meet Rodion Raskolnikov. He's a broke, desperate ex-student in St. Petersburg, just completely crushed by debt. He's all alone, cooped up in this tiny little attic room that the book says is more like a closet than a place to live, just stewing in his own thoughts. And being that poor and that alone, it can be a breeding ground for some really dangerous ideas. And Raskolnikov cooks up a theory that's gonna push him over the edge. Which leads us right here. The extraordinary man, a theory put to the test. Okay, so what is this theory? Basically, Raskolnikov gets it in his head that certain people, the great ones like Napoleon, are just above the law, that they have a right to get rid of anything or anyone standing in their way if it's for some greater good. And the big question haunting him is he one of them? So how do you test a theory like that? Well, he comes up with a plan. He decides he's going to murder an old pawnbroker. In his mind, she's this horrible person, a louse who just preys on the poor. He tells himself that with her money, he could do great things, help all of humanity. It's a twisted, purely intellectual excuse for murder. But here's the catch. His brain might be saying go for it, but his gut is screaming no way. This quote just sums up his inner battle perfectly. He wants to be this grand, extraordinary man, but he's totally terrified by all the little real-world details. Yeah, his big idea is about to smack right into reality. Hard. And that collision, it is an absolute disaster. Which brings us to the real punishment in this story. The torment of conscience, the psychological aftermath. So here's the bottom line. The theory was a complete and total failure. Just utterly wrong. He goes through with it, he commits the murder, and does he feel powerful like Napoleon? Not a chance. He's immediately trapped, not in a jail, but in a prison inside his own head. His punishment isn't a sentence from a judge. It's what's happening inside his mind. He's hit with this crippling paranoia. He gets physically sick, like a raging fever that makes him delirious. He feels completely cut off from every single person around him. The guilt is overwhelming, and he lives in this constant, gut-wrenching terror that he's about to be found out. It's an absolute nightmare. And this line from the book, man, it just says it all. There is no getting away from it. That big, fancy, intellectual theory about being extraordinary, it just crumbles in the face of good old-fashioned human conscience. This inner torture just gets to be too much. He knows he can't live like this anymore. And that brings us to the next chapter of his story. Confession and punishment, the search for redemption. So he finally cracks. He confesses everything to a young woman named Sonia. And listen to his reason. Just listen. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about his ego. Pure pride. I wanted to become a Napoleon. That is why I killed her. He just wanted to see if he could do it, if he was one of the special ones. And once he says it out loud, that's it. The weight is just unbearable. He knows there's only one thing left to do to stop the madness. So he gets up and he starts walking right to the police station. And right here, this is the moment. This is when his whole intellectual fantasy world just evaporates. In the harsh, cold light of a police station, all those grand ideas mean nothing. All that's left is the ugly truth. And then he says it. Just listen to how blunt it is. No philosophy, no excuses, just the raw, horrifying fact. It was I. So the official sentence comes down. 8 years of hard labor in Siberia. But honestly, as we've seen, that almost feels like a slap on the wrist compared to the sentence he's already been serving in his own head ever since it happened. Okay, so the book came out over 150 years ago. Why are we still talking about it? Why does it still get under our skin? That's what we're going to look at now, why this story endures. See, the story doesn't really end with him going to prison. In a way, that's where it begins. Dostoevsky calls it the start of the gradual renewal of a man. It's out there, in the middle of nowhere in Siberia, that Raskolnikov finally starts the long, hard road to becoming human again. And he doesn't do it with some grand theory. He does it through suffering. And maybe, just maybe, through love. And that's really the genius of this book, isn't it? It's way more than just a crime story. It's this deep, unsettling look at guilt, at choice, and at what it even means to be a person. It basically proves that the worst prison in the world is the one you make for yourself, and the toughest judge you'll ever face is your own conscience. So we'll leave you with the same question the book leaves all of us with. If you knew for a fact that nobody would ever find out, what's stopping you? What, when it's just you and your own thoughts, is the thing that decides what's right and what's wrong? That's the terrifying and timeless question at the very heart of Crime and Punishment.